Sadi Cup and welcome to another episode here for the Funky Pod Mindful Media and Communication Sick Edition. As you can see, if you're watching the video feed of the podcast, I'm wearing still my something around my neck because my throat is still sore. It's hard to make sense of everything, to get thoughts right, but there's one topic I really wanted to get out because I really wanted to talk about it with all of you, and because it's been in the news the last few days, and it's the Putin interview with Tucker Carlson. Or it's like the quick history lesson, the Putin lesson towards Tucker Carlson, and just a few thoughts. It's only going to be like 10 minutes or so because I'm going to pass out any moment probably. So again, from a communications media professor's point of view, okay, I'm trying not to bring my personal politics into that. I'm not American, so do whatever you want over there. No, I do have opinions, but I'm trying not to let it influence my analysis of what I saw. Okay, so let's try to analyze the Tucker Carlson Vladimir Putin interview. So the first question that I ask myself, and that I think viewers should ask themselves, and I'm not going to answer it for you, but the question everyone should ask themselves is, why? Why is this happening? Like Tucker Carlson was like strutting around like, I'm the first Western journalist that wants to do an interview with Vladimir Putin. No one else ever tried to do it, and then even the Kremlin, even Putin's people said no, that's not true. Journalists ask all the time for interviews with Putin. He just declines it all the time, which is understandable, okay? But knowing that, you got to ask yourself, why do they agree to Tucker Carlson? Is that because they think he's such a great journalist? Is that because they think he's such a great journalist? Because like his exemplary integrity? Or do they think they can use him or his platform in a way that benefits them? You decide. Okay, I'm not saying what it is. I'm just saying, like, as an audience, you always have to think, like, what's the agenda behind that? Tucker Carlson has an agenda. Why does he want to interview Putin? And Putin has an agenda. Like, why does he agree to the interview with Tucker Carlson? We all have agendas, right? No matter what we do, what we agree to, we all have agendas to a certain extent. So what are the agendas here on both sides? Okay, that's what you have to ask. Then if you look at some contextual background, I mean, we all know who Vladimir Putin is, of course, more or less. No? We also know who Tucker Carlson is, more or less. Now, do we agree with how they are portrayed in public? Again, depends on who we are, depends on what we value. Do we believe Tucker Carlson's former employer? Do we believe Tucker Carlson more than his employers, right? Do we believe those people that talk about Putin all the time? Or do we believe Putin himself? Okay, so, or is it somewhere in the middle, obviously, right? So again, that's what you have to ask yourself when you're watching things like that. Okay. Now if you put like the interview in context, right? So if you look at the interview setting, it was very formal, obviously, right? It was not very inviting. I think that's on purpose. I think the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin's people, they picked the setting obviously on purpose. I mean, obviously, they don't have anything happening by coincidence, right? Nevertheless, a Western media person interviewing Vladimir Putin is, of course, somewhat of significance, no matter who it is, right? I'm talking about the geopolitical landscape here. Now, when we look at the interview and looking at like how I think Vladimir Putin used it, right? Lots of theories at play there. Obviously, it's a 2-hour something interview, so of course, lots of theories at play here. A few theories that are very important, I think, are, well, the framing theory, of course, because Putin, of course, frames the narrative mostly of the Ukraine conflict, of course, which shows just the power that the media has when it comes to frame public perception, right? So the beginning, if you've seen it, Putin says, can I have like 30 seconds to a minute to just quickly recap Russian history? Tucker says, yeah, sure. And then Putin goes on like a 30-minute rant about like the 1300 Russian history, Genghis Khan and his predecessors and so on, which was interesting. Funny to some extent as well, because Tucker Carlson didn't dare to intervene. And it was also interesting to see how Putin once in a while just let Tucker know that he knows who he is. Like, I know you got a history background. I know you want to be part of the CIA, but they didn't want you. So he, at any time, Putin showed Tucker who's the boss, who's in charge, right? You can also see it from body language. Like Putin, as you would expect, the big president of a country, there was some purpose. So you see framing, right? So as a president of a country, you would expect him to be confident, right? As a German, our chancellor, for example, never looks confident. But you would want your president to be confident. So Putin, very confident posture, right? Even sitting there, very confident. While Tucker is just sitting there like, yeah, now. See, I'm trying not to like frame it in a way, but he sits a little bit there, and I don't mean it offensive, but I would not be any different. But he sits a little bit there like a schoolboy, like just he doesn't look as confident. You can say maybe he just want to be polite, fair enough, but he looks like not as assertive as he would have looked in interviews with other people, and as you would think a journalist that's well prepared to ask difficult questions and who's not afraid would look like. Then again, journalists in Russia probably have all the reason in the world to be afraid. Okay, so now framing is one thing, right? So Putin framed the whole Ukraine conflict from his point of view, the Russian or the Putin, no, I'm not saying all of Russia, the Putin point of view, right? So that's one thing, framing the whole narrative. Okay. I said it earlier, everybody has an agenda, right? Putin had an agenda, Tucker Carlson had an agenda. This interview with Putin, of course, elevates his channel on X to like super new heights. Everyone's subscribing to Tucker Carlson on X, on YouTube, wherever. That's his agenda, obviously, right? The agenda of Putin and his people is, of course, to broadcast their point of view, and they probably figure, well, Tucker Carlson has a huge following, like a huge platform by now, since he's independent. That's our audience right now. Let's go all in there. So it makes sense, right? So I think from an agenda setting point of view, it makes complete sense for both sides. Both of their agendas are being catered to, if you will. And I think Putin picked his talking points very well, obviously. And I mean, people like, for example, and again, I'm not adding my opinion here now, but people like voices in the US political sphere, like Dave Smith, for example, they are all in on Putin, or on Tucker Carlson. Like, Tucker Carlson is an American hero. And first I thought Dave Smith was joking, but he was not. And without now adding my opinion to that, it's just interesting to see like those strong reactions to an interview that, again, that might be somewhat opinionated from me, but it didn't have any big revelations or that surfaced anything unexpected, right? Also, we talked about this theory before, the spiral of silence theory. So the reaction of specific target audiences to that interview is as expected, right? So the right wing is now, oh my God, best interview ever. Tucker is our hero. Wow, Russia, yeah, let them do whatever. Donald Trump is like, Russia should do whatever they want to. Yeah, yay. So, and people who are maybe more conservative, but who wouldn't agree with that sentiment, are quiet. They're like, oh man, we're still on the right. So, On the other hand, left wing, of course, like Democrats and so on, they're like, oh, it was terrible. What a shill. Tucker Carlson is a Russian shill. What not? Blah blah blah. And now people who have like a different meaning and like, well, maybe the interview wasn't fantastic, but I mean, at least we had a chance to hear Putin talk, for example, and to see like how he's trying to frame his message. they don't say things like this. They're like, okay, yeah, I'm still a Democrat, so I'm gonna be quiet now. So that's why then the extreme voices of each, like left or right wing, whatever you want to call it, right, camp, are amplified, and the ones that like more moderate views, they usually drowned out because they're quiet. So that's the spiral of silence theory. If you look a little bit at like the rhetorical part, like rhetorical analysis, and since my voice is leaving me, I'm going to keep this very short. I apologize for this. Maybe once my voice is back and I'm not sick anymore, I'm going to do like a more deeper breakdown here. But the rhetorical strategies, right? I mean, in your first year of communication studies, media studies, you learn about like ethos, pathos, logos, and Putin just he utilizes like this approach to perfection, right? So he knows exactly how to talk to the target audience and how to evoke certain reactions. Again, I'm not trying not to let my personal opinion speak too much here. Tucker Carlson looked a little bit and not too confident about like his preparation or his questions. That said, I wouldn't look any better, probably, and who knows what they told him is okay to ask and what's not okay to ask, and if Putin just drops like some knowledge about you and your family in between, you're like, all right, hey, nice to be here, right? So fair enough in this case, though I don't want to be too hard on Tucker Carlson. In this case, what I'm going to be hard on in regards to Tucker, that sounds weird, is then the way he went about it. Apologies about it for that sound. After the interview, because after the interview, he put up like more videos about just by himself, like announcing the interview, like, yeah, so I was the first Western journalist ever to talk to Putin or something like this, and this video is like blah blah blah. And he sold it like it's like this awesome, fantastic, blow me away interview, like crazy revelations, which was not. It was just Putin talking for 2 hours over you, and you didn't ask a single difficult question. Okay? Again, not mad at Tucker Carlson for that, because of course it's difficult to do anything else, but then selling it as like this, oh my God, come to Jesus moment was just too much from my point of view. Okay, now I added a bit of opinion anyway, so I'm sorry about that. Interesting enough, though, the way Putin talked, besides just that filibustering technique that he used, he's very good. Obviously, he's very good, and obviously he knows history and stuff like this. And he's very good at, like, again, back to framing things. Like, so he takes you on a journey, the listener, the audience, and you just, if you give him the benefit of the doubt and you listen, you're like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Oh yeah, sure. Okay, and then this happened, and then this happened. Oh, I can see why you're saying this. Okay, all right. Yeah. Oh, so that's why Ukraine was part of Russia. What? So he's very good at like stringing those facts together and creating a story that sounds reasonable to the audience, right? So that I found this very, very, very interesting, and it's a fantastic skill to have, especially as a politician. No. So that was very interesting to see. And Tucker didn't intervene much, right? So Tucker Carlson was like, oh yeah, right. So didn't really intervene much. So very, very interesting. And non-verbal communication, I had it here in my list, but I mentioned it already. Putin, like, of course, very, very confident. Tucker, not so much. So it clearly showed who's the boss in the room. But who knows, like, how many AK-47s were directed towards Tucker Carlson during this interview. When we look at like audience reception and the media coverage, right? What I just said earlier, those two camps just going at each other, left and right. For a country that is so big, that has so many people in it, like America, it remains fascinating to see that there's no moderate voice in there that says, hey, let's look at both sides, or let's look at the interview, and let's not jump to conclusions right away. I don't want to be in either camp right away. Let's just see what he actually says. And yes, I know there are a few, but they, like I said earlier, they get drowned out usually because only the extreme voices left or right are being amplified, Why? Because it's good for the media, because if you amplify those extreme voices, then you get more clicks, more views, and that's what you want as a media outlet. You don't care left, you don't care right, you just care about the clicks, the views, the money that you're making, right? Your agenda and so on. But we talked about this before. I think echo chambers obviously also lead to like just listening to what or hearing what you want to hear. Of course, there are certain clips from the interview, like for example that filibuster thing that he did in the beginning. That's probably something that pops up in all the democratic echo chambers right now, while then other things pop up in the right-wing echo chamber, so that you only see parts of the interview that work with your confirmation bias anyways. Right, that align with your confirmation bias. Anyways, I would assume most people aren't watching the whole 2.5, 2 hours, whatever, how many minutes interview. They just watch like highlight clips, and you only watch those clips that your echo chamber shows you that align with your confirmation bias. So your opinion just gets amplified. If we reflect a little bit on like theoretically again, only like 2 things I want to add there. I think there are some cultural study implications there as well, because like media obviously serves as like a site of struggle over like meaning and representation, right? So what I mean by this is that media is fantastic because it allows us to see things that otherwise we wouldn't see. But it doesn't just show it to you, right? There's always someone, two-step flow theory, for example, there's always someone that sums this up, that makes sense of what's happening for us. Like in the news, for example, right? You don't see just the images from Gaza, from Ukraine. You see the images and then someone tells you what's happening, why is it happening, and so on. And then either you trust that person or you don't trust that person, right? That's making sense for you, for example, as an example. So media is fantastic to see, consume lots of things that otherwise we wouldn't. But then again, it's putting a filter on everything. It frames things. It never shows you just the raw event that's happening. It's like always like framed, it's narrated, it's put in perspective, it's decoded, encoded, right? So it's never just raw, pure information, which makes it difficult to see, hey, can I believe that or can't I believe that? Can't I believe that? And of course, one thing that we also have to think of, and I mentioned it in the beginning, interviews like that, right? There's a reason why A, Putin said yes to this interview, and B, like, I mean, there are power dynamics at play. One is an independent content creator. The other is an almighty president of Russia. Guess the power dynamics, okay? So that's obviously also at play when it comes to conducting this interview, obviously. If you compare this interview with like other interviews like in history, right? It's hard to do, I think, because there haven't been many interviews with such controversial head of states such as Putin in recent times, I believe. There are interviews with, of course, the president, former president of the US, with chancellors, prime ministers in the EU and whatnot, but none as controversial as Vladimir Putin. So it's hard to compare. To be fair, though, if you would say, okay, let's compare it to Zelensky interviews, I mean, all the Zelensky interviews have been very softball interviews too, to be fair, right? So Zelensky hasn't been asked, at least from the interviews that I saw, Zelensky never been asked any tough questions because, of course, we all sympathize with the Ukraine. Or I shouldn't say that, right? Sympathize with Ukraine. And so, of course, no one's asking like tough questions about the past and like what about the corruption and the Nazi problem and so on, because right now they have a bigger problem, obviously. So, of course, it's understandable why you wouldn't ask about it in the times of need right now. So I think it's just hard to compare it to anything else that we've seen like in the past, to be fair. If I try to conclude it now to save a little bit of what's left from my voice, it's that it was a great showcase in media communications theories. Putin showcased very well how you can grasp hold of an interview, how you can dictate how an interview unfolds, which directions interviews are taking, how to intimidate an interviewer, and just how to actually make the best out of it, and how to get your message across in the best way possible. That's actually already it. I would want to make it more academic sounding, but again, my sickness, like I'm feeling very hot right now. A fever incoming, I guess. So I'm not trying to be too academic right now because I'm just going to mess it up. Okay. So let me know what did you think about the Putin interview, the Tucker Carlson-Putin interview. Did you think Tucker did a good job? Do you think he did not a great job? Do you think it was important to have such an interview? Do you think it was like wrong to give Putin such a platform? What are your thoughts on it? What's your takeaway? Let me know. Funkitpod at Funkitpod on social media, funkitpod@gmail.com. Do like, share, subscribe to this. Otherwise, I'll have to do it like Putin and find out about your past or the secrets that which organizations you wanted to join. Leave a review that helps to reach a wider audience. And next time, I promise, I'm healthy again, and we will have like a more academic breakdown of whatever we're going to discuss. Until then, stay safe, take care, stay healthy. We talk soon. Sawadee.